Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Women Talking Money podcast. I'm Gretchen from Magenta Financial Planning and She Finance. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Zena Hall to speak to me. Zena is a positive mindset and confidence coach, helping women reconnect with who they are, rebuild self-belief, and take empowered, authentic action. Drawing on over 27 years of experience in HR and IT within higher education, she specializes in positive psychology, mindset, and behavioral change. Through her coaching, workshops, and practical tools, she supports individuals and teams to build resilience, shift unhelpful patterns, and step into good potential with clarity and confidence. So welcome, Zena, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's lovely to see you, Gretchen. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. So off the back of me reading all about you, which is always an interesting one for everyone, to hear me talking about them, can you do you want to elaborate a little bit and tell us a bit more about yourself and your career so far?
Sure. So I think if we go back to 2018, it probably helps with my bit of a background of my story. I did a self-development course in 2018, 2019. And following that, I really rediscovered who I was and what I was doing, and sort of put me in touch with who I was at my core, as opposed to this person who was just going to work, having all the identities of a mother, sister, daughter, all of those identities that we carry on and we sort of develop over time. But I'd got lost, and that really sort of helped me find out who I was. And following that, my confidence really boosted. And I love self-development. It's why I've turned into, retrained and become a coach. And that's where my love for self-development and coaching really started. And so that's sort of gone along over the years. 2020, I secured a promotion at work because of my self-worth and things like that. So things have changed. I'm not the person I was 10 years ago. And I now am retrained as a coach following all sorts of changes in my story over the last few years.
Excellent. And you just want to tell people sort of who you work with and what that involves, or maybe who you enjoy working with?
Who do I enjoy working with? Women who are in a place where I was, I guess, probably about 8 or 9 years ago, feeling that overwhelm of just stuckness, of I'm not doing what I'm here to do, what I want to do. They don't know where to go in their career. They don't know where to go in their business. And it's those type of people. It's people who know that there's more, and that's fundamental to me. There's more, but they don't know what that more maybe looks like. And to help somebody discover what that more looks like for them, and that more can look like so many different things for all of us. For some people, it is a change in career. Some people, they come to me thinking they want a new job, and actually they rediscover that their passion and why they took the job that they're doing in the first place. Or maybe it is that they're just stuck financially. They know that they need to do something different, but because of their financial constraints, they're maybe stuck doing what they're doing. They feel fear and can't move forward. So it's all of those types of things that I really, really love helping people do, but specifically women. I've got male clients as well, but women are my absolute passion because we hold ourselves back through our minds.
Thank you. And yeah, absolutely. And I think anyone listening, anyone who knows me, I'm also absolutely so passionate about helping women just, better ourselves, get to a better position in life and really focus on what we want to do. So absolutely. Today we're here to talk about money. What's your earliest memory of money, Zena, and how has it sort of shaped your views?
It's quite interesting. So I'm a farmer's daughter. And if you know any farmers and farmers' daughters, Gretchen, and the stories that there are around being a farmer and, being in farming community, there's all sorts of history that comes with that. There's all sorts of legacies. So if people listening think about farmers, they assume financial stability. They assume there's a lot of wealth. But when you're living within farming family, that's a very different translation. The translation that I remember as a child was very much sort of like fast or famine. And it was, depending on the weather, depending upon what was happening in the financial environment, depending upon what was happening politically. we could talk about this particular subject all day. I'm absolutely certain. So that's where my foundations of money started off. There's also another side to that on the basis of society assumes, and as a family, there was almost a need to portray that in society. So it was quite a complicated memory, I think, that brings up for me. And then I'd go on to different ones in my teenage years and things like that. But that's my first one, I think, sort of coming from a farming background and how that sort of interplays with all sorts of other things like gender stereotypes. My mum was a stay-at-home mum, and things like that. So there's a lot at play, I think, when we start talking about where money fitted as a child for me.
And do you think any of those things that you heard as a child you've carried through?
Yeah, I think so. I think the scarcity mindset is definitely there. So that's sort of making sure there was money for a rainy day. You never know. Never knew whether it was going to rain. And when you're talking about farming, whether it's raining at the right time of year is pretty significant. So I think there's a lot of synergy there with those things. But yeah, I think a lot of the things of self-worth as a woman, it was a very stereotypical house back in the 1970s, 80s. So it was, man works, woman doesn't need to. However, my mum did have a part-time job. She's a trained nurse. She worked in a pharmacy for years. So there were all sorts of conflicting things over the years, I think. And that's quite confusing, I think, as you're going through you're told one thing, but actually what you're seeing is different. So conflicting.
And I would imagine with a farming background, or because what strikes me when you spoke about it, about, things can be seasonal, depends whether it's a good harvest, whether it's been the right rain at the right time, etc. And we all know the ups and downs, as you've said, of political wrangling around things around for farmers. It strikes me as if it's an extremity of being self-employed, in the sense that when you're self-employed, on your own, for example, you see those peaks and troughs in income. You see good periods, potentially bad periods, quiet periods. No one wants to do anything over Christmas, so you've got a month where and I'm thinking of the builder clients I know, they won't work those months, and then they'll work manically other months, and that's what we have to ride through when we're not in those kind of employed roles with a steady pay packet. I guess that's what happens in reality.
Absolutely. And I definitely see that within my own business. Yeah. And it is, unless there's money in the bank account, there is that anxiety that's coming up of sort of like, oh, what's next? What have I got to do? What do you need to do? And I see that with clients as well, because they're, when they're thinking about how much they're going to charge, it might be a sort of a blockage. They're thinking they've got to have this, but it's a fear. There's fear engaging, and it's like, I can't charge this much because this is how much I'm worth. So I think it gets very complicated, Gretchen. I mean, your area of expertise, but from a mindset perspective, we've got so much going on in our minds that it clouds everything, I think.
And I think now, I'm going a bit off piste from getting to the next question, but now we're even more influenced by it. Like, I've literally just 5 minutes before coming on here, we're watching, Mr. Trump in Davos, pronouncing XYZ about what he's going to do. And I mean, then I spoke to a colleague who said, I'm literally not I don't watch anything now at all. So we've also got so much kind of other external pressures that are quicker and more instant, that impact the way that we make those risk decisions, and can make us very, very nervous about making any decisions, or feeling, trapped in that and scared. Scarcity mindset, I think, is getting even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Uncertainty, it really plays a huge part in life for people. They say we're 3 pay packets away from being on the street, or, and we just have to look at what's going on in the world to know that there's enough fear in our everyday life without even turning the news on. We've had it all sorts. I have to admit, I don't watch the news. I get it filtered through my family, which is enough for me, because it doesn't serve me very well.
No, and I think a lot of people, I mean, I said a lot of people certainly since the pandemic have done that. Yeah, it's a scary old situation. It's really interesting, kind of does link through, because we've talked a little bit about that kind of like memories of money, things that you heard, and maybe even conflicts that you heard when you were growing up. In the She Finance workbook, I talk a lot about money stories. So if I said, how do you feel if I asked you to describe your money story today? What would that look like? Or how would you answer that?
When you talk about story, what comes up is sort of like the journey I've been on, I guess. And so if we go there from a sort of a career point of view, and I was working in my previous job before I started being self-employed as a full-time coach, I definitely got myself as I was this is where my worth is, this is how high I'm going. I never had a next level that I was expecting myself to go to. So I think if we're talking about stories and money, I definitely capped where I was at a self-worth level. It's just like, I'm good enough to do this, but I'm not good enough to do that. Whereas with my coaching, that's all disappeared. I removed that level, that glass ceiling, however we want to phrase it, that removed quite a long time ago. And it's just like, for me, stories we tell ourselves. So that's my story so far. But now my story and my glass ceiling is there is no ceiling. I have so much. I've changed so much in what I've done, in the way that I've been through self-development courses and the work that I've done as a coach with other coaches, that actually that glass ceiling no longer exists. And it's all to do with our mindset of the stories that we tell ourselves are the stories that are what turn into our reality. And so because of that, my story with money, I feel hasn't yet finished. I mean, I walked away from my career just knowing that what I was doing as a coach was going to be successful. Now, a lot of people can't do that. I'm in a privileged position that I'm actually able to do that because of our family situation, but also I have absolute self-belief that that's what I'm capable of doing. So I think when you ask me about story, that story is a journey, and that journey is still ongoing. But I know a lot of people don't feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a story, for me, the more I think about it, can be, we talk quite a lot now about how there are different stages of life than maybe there were for the generation above us, where, you worked in the same job and then there was a deadline when you retired and then move on. And I think, now more than ever, there's going to be more stages of life than ever before, and your money story and the things that you tell yourself will change. But just acknowledging that you do have some kind of inbuilt money story and how you might need to think about that and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing itself is quite important, which as a coach you really understand and have done yourself anyway.
I think I do have stories that are still under the surface that haven't quite gone. I mean, I've always been a saver, and there's always been that sort of wanting to save. I've always had a saving habit, and that's never going to go away. And if my pot falls below a certain level, I know that I become, okay, what's going to happen? What needs to change? So those stories, some of them are so subconscious, and they're in our subconscious, and they just are formed so young, aren't they? I think you talked before, Gretchen, they're formed by the age of 7. So those, they develop and they change over time, and our mindsets, we can shift and change. But those stories and those fundamental things that came in at such a young age, we have to keep navigating. I think they still keep coming up.
And do you think so do you think there are things that maybe you were taught, or maybe it was almost like it's not a given, but like a money myth that is just in society, that's the way it is, that, you've had to unlearn and sort of readjust, as we say, like the truth of this actually is that this isn't the case, and this is this is what I need to focus on. So I wonder if you've got an example where you've had to think about behavioural change around that kind of thing.
I'm not sure I can actually find an example for you, Gretchen, on that one. that feels really, not finding one.
That's okay. That's absolutely fine. So I think what's quite interesting for me though is earlier on you were saying that, and you've touched on it a little bit anyway, around the fact that your family was quite a traditional family, and your mum sort of, the messaging was that your mum was stayed at home, but then also there was a conflict, that changed because she also had a job later, on, and things like that. Those kind of money myths that we have are all around, an expectation, let's face it, of society rather than anything else. And I know that in a lot of your work, you do a lot of work around sort of behavioural change and thinking about how we might need to reframe things in our mind. So I guess that's what I was sort of trying to come to.
So I think if we think about it in that way, so behavioural change can go across a lot of different areas, but if I'm talking about behavioural change, it's usually around mindset changes and a lot to do with identity. So I guess if we're talking about money myths and identity, so I would say that I'm a saver and I'm somebody who looks after my money and I'm careful with it. And then other people might label other people. So my identity would be, I am reasonably careful with money. I like to plan for the future. Those are my stories. Those are my beliefs. I think I've always thought that I needed to have a pot of money that would be something that was for the rainy day. And now I've definitely changed that. It's like, yes, you can have a rainy day pot, but you can also have a fun pot. You can also have different pots. So I think when you get stuck in one lot of thinking and one identity with money, I'm a saver. It's just like, yeah, and I'm somebody who absolutely loves treating myself because I'm worth it. And those type of things and those types of shifts and behavioural changes definitely, I would say, have come later in life for me. But other people, their self-worth is, well, actually, I deserve this. So they'll prioritise that. So I think if we're talking about that sort of thing, I mean, we all have habits around all sorts of things. And I guess money habits are really deep rooted. And I think we're talking in January, and all of our habits change, New Year's resolutions and things. Right at the moment, I've got a YouTube series that's coming out, and that's about habit change and goals that we set ourselves. Some people will have financial goals of, I want to achieve X by the end of the year, so I want to have so much income. So I've got a couple of business clients who are, trying to raise the bar. So they're setting their goals. We've done some visualization work, looking at the end of the year to see what that might look like for them, how it will feel, where they can feel that in the body, who they need to become, identity needs to be able to be the person who earns X by the end of the year. And those are huge people. So I've got a series on YouTube that people can go and have a look at that's about habit change and some of the things that you can do to like help yourself change your mindset, work out who you are, and how you get there. So but if we're talking about how we suddenly change a money habit, I'd like your reflection on that personally, because it's just like, where do you start with that one?
Well, and of course, like I was about to say, right at the start, was recognizing habits are key to all of that, both from whether it's money or things you do in business or things that are holding you back. It's even just recognizing that you do you feel a certain way, and that is leading a habit. And is that habit doing you good, or is it harming you? And reflecting on that. And I think a lot of things that come up for people are about debt. And with good debt, bad debt, no debt, and habits, and thinking and adjusting your thoughts around that. I'm quite interested that several times you've said, I've got an amount of money, I'm a saver, I've got an amount of money that is my comfort, I need that much money. And I'm intrigued to understand how you came to the figure. You don't need to tell me the figure, but how is there an assessment behind that? Or is it that makes you feel very, very comfortable?
That's a really interesting question. I think the amount of money goes up.
Okay, that's even more interesting.
So living in an abundant mindset rather than a scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
So if we imagine our mindset. I'm talking about myself, but I am also talking about people in generalization as well. So if we talk about living in an abundant mind, with an abundant mindset, we imagine that there is plenty and there's more than enough for everyone to go around. If we live in a scarcity mindset, we decide that actually the world is a slightly worse place and we've got to look after things. So I think I've switched from being in a scarcity mindset to an abundancy mindset. And so now my abundancy mindset of thinking of, that we put it out into the universe and we think about things in a grander scheme, and we take the glass ceiling away and then we think about abundance, then actually my money pot almost gets bigger, because that makes it more comfortable for some reason, which it shouldn't, which is the opposite. So it's really, it's fascinating just talking to you and just reflecting on what I'm saying myself.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, why does it need to be bigger? And I think it's because my love of handbags gets bigger. That's okay. So,
yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting though, because it plays into the risk conversation as well, and how much risk and our kind of protection needs for ourselves. And so it feels like we're saying, well, I can move from the scarcity mindset provided I've got a certain amount that allows me to flow into the abundance mindset. And I mean, in a way that makes complete sense, because we need an emergency fund. We need to know that we've got enough money if things go wrong, and especially if we're self-employed and we're thinking about all of those things and we don't know where the next client's coming from and all of that. But it is quite interesting that it just keeps going up. I think there's probably a number that we need that normally we would say, as a financial advisor, we would say that there's a number, because it would be, it would be 6 months expenditure, for example. So it'd be really, really clear what that was. And that would then be the amount. And then after that, you'd either save it in a different way, invest it, or have your fun pot as well. So it's quite interesting.
I'm an interesting person.
Oh dear. So do you think, moving on a little bit, do you think you've ever had a financial wake-up call or turning point that has made you kind of reset almost?
I think when I was a student, I think that would probably be when the wake-up call sort of came. And I think, so I definitely lived in an abundant mindset when I was a student, although I had no money. But there was this amazing thing called an overdraft, which I'd never had before. And we're talking a long time ago. And then there were student loans. And I think I was probably in one of the first years that actually took out student loans. And I remember coming out of college and I got a job, and my purpose in life was to save as much money as possible to go traveling. That was absolutely what was going to happen. And but the first thing I needed to do in my head was pay off the debt that I had. And actually, in hindsight, if we now go forward, it's just like, so I paid back my student loan as a priority. And of course, that now is not something that necessarily financially you would suggest to somebody coming out of university. Like, well, you don't need to necessarily worry about that one right at the moment, potentially. What is it? What did you want to do? So I think that would be my wake-up call when I realised that, had I not paid off my student debt at that point, it was actually a very good investment, for want of a better word, at that point in time. And there was no need for me to pay it off. But because of my background of just, you don't get in debt, debt is a bad thing. That wasn't an option. It was, you pay that off and then you start saving to go traveling.
That is really interesting, because as you say, there's a whole assessment now about, the good debt, bad debt, and there's a whole, actually lots of, it depends what scheme you're on. Obviously, I don't want to start giving any kind of do or don't repay student loans, but there's certainly something to be said for him, leaving that and prioritizing, maybe other things, might be traveling, might be other things against that. So it's really interesting. It's not come up before around that. So thank you. So if we were talk about financial freedom, what would financial freedom, be for you?
Financial freedom for me is being able to be free to have fun, because fun and joy and happiness is so important to us. Freedom to be able to allow my family, my two young daughters, the ability to not have to worry. And it's removing that worry. That freedom for me is not having to worry, because I saw so much worry and so much pressure on my dad when we were young, when the weather was bad. So much pressure on so many people. And I think freedom, money, financial freedom for me is to remove that worry and that burden that so many people feel. And I'm not necessarily, I feel like I probably have financial freedom. I don't feel they're a worry myself personally. But to see people who worry about money that's what freedom is, to remove that worry.
And if I was to ask you if you could sort of give, for the people listening, one piece of money wisdom you'd like them to take away from our conversation, from your experiences, what would that be?
Have a look at what your identity is around money and the stories that you are telling yourself, and ask them whether they're serving you. Are they still relevant? And if they're not relevant, what could they be changed? You know, if you're identifying with money and you've got a mindset about doing it, I need that promotion because I need, you know, what is it actually? What are you looking for? Are you chasing happiness, or is it because you actually need the money? You know, what are you telling yourself? What are those stories? And just notice awareness around all of the stories we tell ourselves, whether it's to do with money, any kind of anything in our life to do with our behaviours and who we identify with, and the stories that we tell ourselves. So just notice what you're saying to yourself. Are you saying, I'm not worth it? I'm not worth that dress. I'm not worth that extra little bit of time. I'm not worth going on holiday. It's not for me. If those are the things you're telling yourself, then is it the money, or is it actually a bit deeper inside? So I think it would be that would be what I would ask people to do. Just notice what the story.
Great. And listen, you mentioned the YouTube recordings and things that you've got. So before we end, why don't you let everyone know a bit more about that, and then also how they can find you and read more about what it is that you're doing in your coaching?
So I'm on all of the social media platforms. I show up on Instagram every day, helping people just with tiny little tweaks that they can make for their health. I've got my YouTube channel where I push out information about positive psychology, things that can help people specifically around mindset and habit change at the moment. And February, I'll be releasing another series, and we'll be talking about more in depth about identity. There's also a journal that's free to download on my website that people can download. It's a 43-page journal about habit change and how they can help themselves. And generally, I'm about on social media. Check out my website and want to change.
Excellent. Well, we'll make sure we link as much as we possibly can in the show notes anyway, but it's always good to have that from you. So thank you so much for speaking to me today. I've really enjoyed it. I look forward to getting it published so everyone can listen.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for having me as a guest, Gretchen.